This video is going to be about using the embroidery side of your 15,000 machine. And I want to first of all start off, you can see what I've got here on the screen are some laminated cards that came with our machines, and they are called the quick reference charts. There's two of them. They have both a front and a back, and they cover all of the different little thumbnail icons that are on the sewing machine, and they're just kind of like a really quick little checklist of what the parts are, what the keys are, and what they are for. So you've got a card that's going to include common settings that regard both sewing and embroidery side of the machine. You will also have one that's specifically for the embroidery mode, and you will have some things here also that are all about different sewing applications and different tools there. So please take advantage of the fact that you've got these that came with the machine. These work right alongside of the manual. And my first recommendation to you is, if you have never done so, take out that manual, open it up, turn on your sewing machine, and walk through the manual while you are pressing the keys and looking at the functions of the machine. Even if you don't do any sewing or embroidery right at the very start, just familiarize yourself using the manual and using these application cards, these reference charts, to get a better feel for your machine and all of the wonderful things that it can do. So having said that, all the wonderful things it can do is the reason why I'm making this video about the embroidery mode. So what I've got up on the screen of my machine right now is a design that I composed completely from built-in parts of the embroidery mode on the machine. And I'm going to show you how I created that. Now, it might not be something that you think you might ever use, but what it involves right here is just using all the different functions of the parts that are on our machine. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just go ahead and close this window. The machine is telling me that any unsaved designs are going to be erased, and I'm fine with that. So I'm going to say OK, and what that does, it has now brought me back to what is known as the home screen of the embroidery side of the machine. If you're not sure about how you even get there, it's the icon that's at the bottom toolbar right here. Next to the little house, that's our home button. When we're in the home button, it's going to give us, if we're on the sewing side of the machine, it's going to give us the basic screen for the sewing side. If we're on the embroidery side of the machine, it's giving us the basic screen for the embroidery side. So let me demonstrate. This icon right here has a sewing machine, two sewing machines. One of them is a sewing machine with no hoop. The other one, if you look carefully at it, does have a hoop on it. So that is highlighted. It's larger. That's why we're on the embroidery side. If I were to choose to go back to sewing, I would simply select it. It would tell me that we are switching to ordinary sewing mode. Any unsaved designs will be erased. I would say OK. And now I would be back in the sewing side of the machine, and you're going to see down here on the toolbar that the sewing machine is larger than the embroidery. Okay? Good thing to know, right? If I'm on the home screen here, I would see all the different kinds of decorative stitches and the sewing applications button that I can see only when I'm on the sewing side. Down here at the bottom, just a quick review, you've also got being able to take designs out that you have saved. You've got settings button. We're going to look at that in a little while. This is a help menu, and this is the lock key that we always use whenever we are using the embroidery, or the needle threader. All right, so let's go back to embroidery because that's what we're here for today. All right, we're back on the home screen. Now, if I were to be following the quick reference chart for embroidery mode, which looks like this, you would find that all of these little icons on the chart are what I'm actually going to be walking through as we talk about this screen right here. So the very first thing on the home screen here is, this is our design category. This is where we can select some of the built-in designs. This is where we will be working with lettering, also monogramming, also some decorative stitches that are built into the embroidery side of the machine. This little grid is called the edit mode. Alrighty, so if we were to look at, first of all, our design that are built into the machine, right from the very top, we are going to look at, we've got two different functions for sorting how we are going to look at our designs. The first one looks like a little flower, and this little flower is going to show all of the designs on the machine, and they are going to be just pages and pages and pages of designs, okay? Lots and lots and lots of built-in designs. What they are actually is showing this particular category. This is the world of embroidery design. So I'm going to close this screen and I'm just going to show you, if I were to do this and I were to select that button, once again, I didn't have it selected before, it's going to show me all of these different categories of different designs that are built into the machine. And as I said, there's several different pages of designs here that we can take a look at. All right, for right now, we're going to stay with the world of embroidery designs. I'm just going to X out of that particular screen to show you this one here. This has a design, a little image of a hoop on it. When I select that, the sorting is going to be done according to which hoop I think I might want to work in. So I want to just have you notice here that only 4 of the hoops that are available for our sewing machine are actually going to show here. And these are the ones that came with our machine. They are standard. There's also 3 other hoops that were not standard that came as accessories, and we will see a hoop list of those later on when we're in the edit mode of the machine. But these are the ones that are sorted, that we can sort according to size. All right, so that's 2 different ways of sorting our designs, or we could just scroll through, you know, once one of the categories is selected, we can just scroll through those designs. So one of the things that I'm going to not talk about right at this point in time is what the ready to sew screen looks like, because that would be actually the next thing that is talked about on our quick reference chart, is looking at that ready to sew screen. But what we're going to do instead of that is we're going to go ahead and look at our embroidery edit screen. Then once we have a design that we have created, we will go into the ready to sew screen and we will talk about those functions. I think that will be a little bit more logical. All right, so let's go back to our menu here. So these were the built-in designs. This one here is going to be lettering, and as I mentioned before, it will also have some decorative stitches and things like that. I'm going to go through this real quickly right now. We're going to look at it in greater detail later on in this video, but let's take a look. We've got a toolbar up on top. We've got a little window right here where we will be inserting designs or letters or of that nature. And these are going to be some buttons that we can go forwards and backwards through our design to fine-tune it if we've made a mistake or something along those lines. Let's take a look at this top toolbar and the thumbnails that are on it. Right here, this is the one that's going to be our monogram design styles. We've got a toolbar right here, and it's all the way down at the bottom because of what I was just personally working on. We've got a lot of different font styles that are built into the machine. So that is the first button that you would select for choosing which font style you had. I'm just going to go ahead and come up to Gothic, so one of them is chosen. The next icon over has an AB that is horizontal and an AB that is vertical. That's how we're going to choose whether or not we want our lettering to come into the hoop, reading from left to right, or if we are going to have it come into the hoop, reading from top to bottom. The next little thumbnail over is our size. The default on this machine is medium, but we will also be able to choose small and large letters. The next one over is our upper and lower case, and when we select that, you're going to see that the screen actually does change to the upper and lower case. You're going to be able to also scroll down in the toolbar to get numbers and characters, and each one of the fonts might be slightly different depending on, you know, what has been programmed into the machine. So it's kind of fun to play along with some of those things. The next tool over is a little trash can tool, and that's the one that we will use whenever we've made a mistake and we need to insert or delete a character that we've misspelled, or maybe even the whole line of text that we've done. Last of all, we have a little folder with an arrow going into it, and that's a little folder that we can use to save this particular line of text into the hard drive of our machine or onto our USB stick, and we'll talk about saving designs somewhat later. All right, so that's how we get around in the monogram section. I'm just going to walk through quickly. These are the fonts that are all the different lettering fonts. Here are some 2-letter and 3-letter monogram styles that we could open up, and let's just say, for example, we wanted to you know, do a little, that's a 2-letter font. Okay, let's say that I don't really want that. I could pick a little frame for it. I could do all kinds of things, but I'm not going to do that at this point in time. I'm going to close the window. It's not saving anything. The next section down, if I continue to go on down, we've got some border stitches. These are little decorative stitches that we can use to create borders and do fun things with our embroidery designs. And we've got some normal sew category. Normal sew are decorative stitches that are similar to some of the decorative stitches that are on the sewing side of the machine. And there's several pages of decorative stitches that we can play with there as well. It's kind of fun. Last of all, this is a font that was added on. I think, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think it was in addition to the Janome 15,000 Quilt Maker edition. And that was also upgraded for anybody that upgraded their machines. I believe this Micro Gothic font came in at that point in time. All right, so we have gone through how do you find some built-in designs, the different ways to sort them. Here is the monogramming and lettering section along with some decorative stitches. Here is our edit mode. It's a little grid that's on the screen, and when I open it up, I'm going to have a toolbar that's going to come all along the side here of the right of the window. And you're going to notice that almost everything here is grayed out. Nothing to be done. The reason why is because there's really nothing on the screen for us to play with at this point in time. But one of the things I want to mention too is the first thing that you typically will do when you come into the edit mode. Maybe you already know the size hoop that you're going to be using, or maybe you just want to play around on the screen. What we're going to do today is we're just going to play around on the screen. And one of the recommendations that I usually have is that you would choose the largest hoop, which in this case is the GR hoop. And the reason why is because that way you could play around with virtually every single design that's built into the machine. And you're not limited if you've chosen the largest hoop. It doesn't mean you have to stay with the largest hoop once you've composed your design that you've got on screen. It's also called a hooping. But you would then choose the right size hoop to actually use for what you have composed here. If I use the downward arrows, so what this is, these are the 4 hoops that I mentioned before that came with the machine. If I use the downward arrow, we're going to see 3 more hoops that are available as options. Now, some of you may have received the ASQ22 hoop, which is the hoop that is designed to be used for quilting because it's got really large magnets. It's only a 1-part hoop as opposed to a 2-part hoop, and it holds thicker items with larger magnetic clamps. The hat hoop is another little addition that was able to be purchased. The RE18 is about a 5.5 by 7-inch hoop. It was also an add-on from Janome by request of the customers. Now the RE18, if you purchase this hoop, it comes with a little USB drive that has embroidery designs on it that fit this specific hoop. You will not be able to see those designs in the built-in menu of the machine because they are add-ons. Okay, just thought I would mention that. So let's go back up. Let's go ahead and select. For right now, I think we'll go ahead and select the square 23 hoop. You're going to notice that I've got a blank screen here, but it does have a crosshair to show me the vertical and horizontal positioning of the exact center of this hoop. Now I'm going to take a little drive over into the set screen of the machine real quickly, because when we're in the set screen of the machine and we are in the embroidery section up here, we're going to see that we've got 6 pages of different things that we can select and change for our own preferences. Whenever something has been selected and saved as your preference, that little button is going to look black. All right, so if I just scroll on down here, one of the things that we can turn off and on is the grid lines for our hoop. So I'm going to turn that on temporarily. Has turned black. The next thing that comes up here is we can change the grid size of this. Now the grid size, when it is set at 10 millimeters, I have my machine set at the metric system right now, not in the inches system. I prefer this for when I'm actually working on my machine, but you may be different. But just to know, this 10 millimeter grid size is the same size as the plastic grids that come with our hoops. So it can come in handy to have that be at 10 millimeters. I'm going to say OK for right now. This is what it looks like when it's on the screen. Okay, If I decided that I wanted to change my grid size for some reason, and let's say I wanted to move it all the way up to 30 millimeters, that's the largest that it can be, I do have to say okay. That's how it's going to look with the larger grid size. So having a grid on the screen is oftentimes very helpful when we are working with the edit mode, because it does help us to keep things aligned. You know, as we're moving little designs on the screen, we've got some references by having that grid on there. So actually, I think what I'll do right now is I'll go ahead and leave this one on just for the sake of having it on. All right, so here we are. Again, everything is pretty much still grayed out. We can't really do much more here because we need to get some designs onto our screen. Up here at the top of the screen, we're going to see that the square 23 hoop has been selected, and next step would be to go ahead and open a design. Two different ways you can do this. We could either go to our home screen and we could navigate into our built-in designs, or if I have a USB on my machine that has some designs that I have placed on it, I could use this little arrow coming out of a folder, find that on my USB, and let's just say I've got, you know, maybe I would want to open a folder. I would find a design that I could open up. I'm going to tell you this as well. If your hoop that you have selected is too small for the design that you want to open up, you probably will not be able to find the design here. That's often a very common size. See what happens here? It says it's exceeding the hoop size. So that means you're going to get that warning message if the machine thinks the design is too large for the hoop you've selected. Also, very common problem, if the design is in the wrong direction. I better talk about this briefly. I'm going to go into the GR hoop here. So now I've got the larger hoop on screen. But if that design that I wanted to open up, let's just say it was this one here, was in the opposite direction, let's just say that it was rotated this other direction, and this would be a perfect one actually to choose, because this one here is a rectangular shaped design. If this design was rotated 45 or 90 degrees over to the other direction, the machine will not think it's even there. It won't even know it's there because it's too big in that direction for this particular hoop. Hope that makes sense. It's a very, very common problem because a lot of digitizers sell designs and they haven't rotated them properly for Janome machines. And if the design's too big for your hoop, the machine's not going to want to let you open it to rotate it. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense. I'm going to use one of the icons here that's the trash can. I'm going to throw it away. So I preempted myself. So what I'm going to do, remember when I started up this exercise, I had a little design up on the screen? Well, I'm going to find the design that I was using to do that. And what I'm going to do is recreate it, because it's a pretty handy little design for just using some of the tools within the edit screen. It's this one right here. It's number 40. It's just a little kind of a scroll type of a design. And I'm just going to use some of the tools that are on the machine so that we can edit this a little bit. So it is selected. And if you look closely at this, I'm going to just zoom in very, very briefly because I don't want to get my camera too far out of whack. You're going to see that it's got a little green boundary box all the way around it. Now it's going to be common whenever a design has been selected, it's always going to have that boundary box around it. All right, so keep that in mind. Green boundary box means a design is selected. So what we can do with this, here is a little arrow keys on the keyboard. This right here in the center will, if I decide that I wanted to move this design, and then I decided I didn't like it, I could hit that arrow button and it pops it right back into the center of the hoop once again. Or I could use the little directional arrows. I'm actually very fond of using the directional arrows, especially when I need to line things up with one another, because then it keeps them, you know, just aligned a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up in this upper right quadrant of the hoop. And I'm going to actually move it up, and then I'm going to move it over. What I'm next going to use, we're going to talk about some of the other tools that are on here, but for what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit to one of the tools that's got this little magnifying glass on it, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to zoom in. You've got 3 different ones. The first one is as real size. This one's a little bit bigger, and I'm going to close that. Oops, close. Come back to the tool again, and this one here, it really zooms in a whole lot bigger. So that's the way that that part works. This is also a little panning tool, and if I wanted to, you know, be able to scroll around on my screen, I could use this little pan tool. This design is already selected, and what my point is that I want to do is I want to get it all the way over onto these crosshairs. So I'm just going to zig and zag it over just a little tiny bit by tiny bit. And I'm going to come down little bit by little bit. Now, you see this green boundary box, when it finally gets aligned with these lines here, it's going to kind of disappear. It's sort of, if you look at it, it sort of gets bright. I don't know if that's going to show up that well, but the green lines just got brighter to show that it's exactly lined up on that grid. I'm now going to turn this tool off just by clicking it and closing it. And my next thing that I'm going to do is go back up on the edit bar. I'm going to use, I can actually duplicate this design. What I want to do is I want to make 4 of them. So I can do it 2 different ways. I could use my copy and paste button, or I could use another button that's a little bit further down that's called the cornering tool. But first of all, let's go ahead and talk about copy paste, even though that might not be the one I ultimately use. It's the next one down. It's got 2 little pieces, 2 little squares with some arrows in between them. One's little, one's big. That's our indication that that's going to resize the design. When I turn it on, we've now got a little toolbar at the bottom to tell us how much are we going to make it larger or smaller. Any design that you open up on your machine, you're going to be able to make it 20% larger or 20% smaller. Now notice that when we do that, it does not change how many stitches are actually part of this design. All right, so if it's a pretty dense design and we enlarge it 20%, which makes it up to 120%, those same amount of stitches are now stretched out, and it's going to be a less dense embroidery design. The opposite of that is if we made it smaller. All those original amount of stitches are now going to be squished down into a smaller amount of space, so it's going to be a much denser design. Now, one of the things that a lot of digitizers do is they sell designs not knowing what a person is planning to do with them. And when they do that, oftentimes they digitize things to be too dense. So if size isn't going to make a huge difference on the design that you're actually making, sometimes if you've stitched out a design and found that it's too dense and you don't have digitizing software, you might want to try this little trick of just opening it here in the edit screen, enlarging it some to spread out those stitches, and you might get a better result. Okay? So that's how we resize things. If we have made any changes that we want to keep, then we would say okay. If we have not made changes that we want to keep, we will just close this screen. All right, the next tool down is our copy paste button. So copy paste, the design has to be selected. If you hit copy and paste, this little thing just blinked at us just a little tiny bit. May not have even have noticed it, and it copies and pastes it exactly on top of the one that was already there. So here it is right here. Okay, have to be kind of careful with this because sometimes people don't notice that it's already copied and pasted, and they end up piling too many designs up on top of one another. So be careful with that tool, but that's how you copy and paste. If we want to get rid of what we just made, go ahead and hit the trash can, and it's now gone. Once we have gotten rid of something on the screen, there's no going back. There's no undo button on the sewing machine screen. Okay, so I'm going to actually come back to full size here. Turn that off. Yeah, full size. Oops, not what I want to do. I want to say okay. Oh my goodness, it sent me into ready to sew screen. We're going to talk about that later. Got to be careful with that one. That happens fairly frequently. I'm going to come back up to change my hoop size back to square 23. Okay, so now what we're going to do is play around with the rotating tool. So this is also pretty cool. Again, design has to be selected. Turn on this little circle of arrows. We can rotate by 45 degrees at a time. We can rotate by 1 degree at a time, just to fine-tune our design however we might want it. If we've made any changes we want to keep, we must say OK. If we made changes and we don't want to keep them, we can close the screen. So you can see that it put my design back into that corner. The next little tool, this isn't going to show up a whole lot with this particular design. Maybe what I'll do is real quickly I'll come and open something in addition to that. Yeah, I'll delete this in a little bit. So these are our flipping tools. So we can flip it here on the vertical. We could flip it on the horizontal. We can just do, you know, all kinds of fun things with that. Okay, so those are the flipping or mirror imaging tools. I'm going to throw that away. Further on down, we're going to see that we've got an ABC that is sort of blacked out, grayed out is what we call that, because there's nothing on here that fell into that category. Next thing we have is a tool, again, that we cannot see, but we'll work with this one in a while. This one here is called our grouping tool. This is the cornering tool. This is the one I'm trying to get at here. So what this does is it's a handy way of duplicating an item. Once your item is selected, if you just hit that cornering tool, it automatically puts 4 of those images right on the screen, right in conjunction with the one that's already been selected. So it's a pretty nice tool for using in lots of different ways. Okay, I like that a lot. That's a lot of fun. We're going to play around a little bit with this 1, 2, 3 and the coloring options and some of the other stuff in just a few minutes. We're going to compose a little bit more detail onto this design at this point. And we're going to use our home button. We're going to come into the lettering toolbar. I'm going to choose, I think I'm going to choose normal sew stitches, and I'm just going to make myself a border. So let's just say what I will do here is, depending on the size of the hoop that we have selected and depending on the little motif that we are selecting, it's only going to allow us to put in a certain amount before it runs out of space. So that's about how many it's going to let me do here. I'm going to say OK. It's brought this into the screen, and you can see pretty much it's almost filled up the entire width of the screen. It's black at this point. Now if I wanted to change the color of this, I would go ahead and come into my rainbow toolbar right now, and I would change the color. So it's selected and it's black. All of these decorative stitches and all of the lettering always come in as 002 Janome black, or the other brand of thread that you might have chosen in the thread selection chart. What I'm going to do right now is select a different color. I think I'll go with purple. We've got a toolbar here where we can make it a darker purple. Now the thing is that if you're going to make any changes to any of these objects before you duplicate them or copy paste them, it's best to make it right away, because you will never get back to that same exact color again. So I'm just going to change it there. Now let's say there's another really neat tool here. There's 2 different tools here that I think are really quite handy. We'll talk about the first one up here. This up here is showing the colors of the design. This one here is showing the color of the background. So this is pretty handy, because if we wanted to change the background to match our fabric color, let's just say our fabric might be gray. So I chose the white, and I'm just going to drag my color to make it a little bit darker of a color. Maybe that's too dark. A little bit lighter. It has changed the background, and I'm going to say that, yeah, I like that. Okay, we'll leave it there. It doesn't really show up here, but it will show up when we go back into the edit screen. See this little toolbar? This little toolbar has a pencil next to it. What I find wonderful about this little function here is if I am using a particular color of thread and I want to make sure that I use that exact right color, I can type in here the brand of thread that it is. I'm going to pretend right now that I'm using Isacord thread, and I'm just going to abbreviate capital I SC to indicate Isacord, and let's just say that my thread color is color number 223. So my thread is Isacord 223, and if I say OK here, it's now named it in addition to having changed the color. And when I say OK, and I'm now back in my edit screen, you're going to see that my light gray background is there. You're going to see that my decorative stitch line has turned into that dark purple, and when we go over into the Ready to Sew screen, that dark purple object is going to have Isacord 223 as part of its description. You'll see that later on. Okay, so here we've got this cool little line. what I'm going to do with it next is use a tool that we weren't able to use a while ago as we were scrolling through. It's this ABC with an arc on it. So this applies to everything that comes out of that lettering category. And what it does is it helps us to make arches, spread out our letters or get them a little bit closer together. Object is selected. I'm going to arc it just to make a very gentle arc like that. And I will say OK. I'm going to use my up arrow and I'm going to just drag it all the way up, straight up at the top. It's still centered in the hoop. Kind of like that. I'm going to try to make a little bit of a frame. Now this may have ended up being a little bit too long. I don't know that yet because I haven't played around with this. But let's just go ahead and let's see if the copy to the corner tool works. It did. But what has also happened is that because it was in this direction rather than being in the corner of a hoop, there's actually two objects here and there's going to be two objects here. So this one here, what I'm going to do is try to rotate it using my rotate button. Now I don't know if it's going to let me rotate it because sometimes when something's too big like this, yeah, see how this, I can't say OK? All right, so that didn't work. So what I'm going to have to do is drag it down to the center of the hoop. I can actually hit the centering button here. And now I can rotate it. I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. Why am I going to rotate it 45 degrees? Because in the English language, we read from left to right. And when these lettering objects, they're decorative stitches, but the machine thinks they're lettering, they're going to stitch out from left to right. Because this is a copy of this one, this is going to be the left, this is going to be the right. In other words, I'm going to rotate it so that it's going to be the top and the bottom, but it really is left to right so far as how it thinks it is. All right, so I have rotated it. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to use my arrow button and I'm going to push it all the way over to the right side. I can see that these are going to be too long for what I'm doing here. So about how long are they? You know, I think I'm going to go ahead and trash these. I'm going to trash all of them and I'm going to make this, I'm going to just count these really quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I did 11 repeats and 11 was too many. So let's take it down to, let's say maybe 9. Let's just do all that whole process again. So whenever you're playing around with these things, I just got to warn you, there's a lot of playing around that you have to do, but it can be quite fun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that was too many. I'm going to go back. I'm going to delete that one. That might be a little bit better. Maybe too short. We'll see. What am I going to do with it? First of all, we'll go change the color. We'll pick a purple. We'll rename it. Okay. I will say OK. I'll drag it all the way to the top. And even if it's too small, that's going to be better than it being too large for this demonstration that we're doing. We'll go find the arc. We'll arc it maybe, it's not going to let me because it's too far up. Okay, come down a little bit. Now let's arc it. A little bit too much, huh? Just a slight arc, that's all we need. We'll say OK, and what we will do next is go ahead and use our cornering tool, just like we did a little while ago, as an easy way to get 4 copies of it. We'll choose one of them and we will center it. We will then rotate it 45 degrees, 45 degrees. We'll say OK. We'll push it over to the little bit further side of the hoop here. We'll move all of these again in a little while. We'll select one of these ones. We'll center it so that we can rotate it. Let's rotate it. Now remember this one, if it was coming in left to right, and we can even tell by the way they designed, this would be reading from right to left. So we want to rotate this one that direction. We're going to go 45 degrees, say okay. I hope that's making sense. And this is the reason why you want to pay attention to that, is because when you're actually stitching this out, it would actually help us to avoid some jumps and starts and stops in our design. So let's take that all the way up to the top. Remember, they are centered. And that one all the way to the bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and open something else up that we can put into those corners there. Don't really know what that might be. Let's see. I think what I'll do, I think I had this on the other design too. I think I used this. I'm going to use this little circle. I'm going to put about maybe 4 of them as an experiment. Let's see what that looks like. They're black right now. Let's turn them, let's just leave them black for the sake of time, okay? Let me go ahead and rotate this 45 degrees. I wonder if it'll let me arc it. What will happen if I arc it? It's kind of cute. I think I'll spread them out a little smidgen. Yeah, I like that. All right, let's say okay. I'm going to try to drag that up into that corner there. I may have to use my zooming in tool so that I can see this better. Let's see if I'm going to be able to do that. Okay, so I'm going to use the zoom tool. I oftentimes have trouble with this. Whatever the object is that is selected, when you select that, it's going to kind of zoom into, well, it didn't really zoom into it, did it? Okay, I'm panning, so I'm moving the whole screen. The panning button is operational. So here that is. Let's just use little arrow buttons. It's not really quite long enough, is it? But you know what? It's not bad. So this is one of the cases when having a grid on the screen actually might help. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I really need to get this video done without it lasting too very long. I think that looks pretty good right in there. Now, if I wanted to change the color, I could change it if I wanted to, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the tool off, go back to full size. Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to find the corner tool. Where is she? She's right here. So now I've got those little doodads in the corner. So see, that's how simple it is to actually play around with some of the built-in things that are on the machine. This is pretty easy to do, you know, and you don't have any real commitment here. Now, one of the things that I'm going to look at next, we've looked at cornering, we've looked at using the zooming in tool or the grouping tool. Now, no, we didn't look at the grouping tool. What is the grouping tool? It's this one right here. Now, when we do this, we've got a choice of, and I don't really think I've got a good example right here of what I have made on the screen, but this tool right here on the left-hand side is a tool where we can select individual objects. So we would turn that on, and we could just say that I want to select all of these black things, and each one is now getting a little boundary box around that. Do you see that? So then I could say okay. And what could I do with that boundary box? You know what? Not a whole bunch. I could copy and paste them. I could throw all of those away. I could zoom in on them. But unfortunately, this does not give me the option of changing the colors of all of those if I had wanted to. So, you know, it's just kind of a funky little tool. I don't know. These little buttons help us to advance through all of them. So if that was there, you know, or I could get back out of here. Let's turn the tool off. That's how the grouping, so the other option about grouping tool, or this one here, this selects the entire object. And let's just say if I selected that entire object, you know, maybe I would want to have moved it or something all together. That's how those two tools can come quite in handy. Okay, so let's just say okay. I'm thinking that might send me to ready to sew. Let's close that screen. All right, the next tool down is 1, 2, 3. This is what would change the stitching order of our design that we've made. So let's just say, for example, that when you are going to send this over to the Ready to Sew screen, if you wanted it to stitch in some specific order, let's just say, for example, that you wanted the blue to stitch first, and then you wanted the yellow, and then you wanted the black, then you would order it here. So you just absolutely turn it on, and then you go through your design. So as you go through the design, it gets a little boundary box around it, and it's counting these objects. So I'm selecting all of those. Then I'm going to select my yellows. Then I would do my black. Okay? And what it's done is it has reordered those in that particular order. Now this does not get saved. When you save this design, it doesn't get saved, but it would stitch it out over in the sewing Ready to Sew screen in the order that we wanted it to. I wish I'd opened the Ready to Sew screen and showed you the difference. Maybe we'll get there in a while. Anyway, the next color tool right here is called this color sort tool, which is showing you that on the screen you've got a lot of spools of thread down to a few spools of thread. This again, you can do this color sort right before you send it to the machine for Ready to Sew, and it's a temporary saving of that. This next button is called a monochrome button. If you turn this one on, it's going to turn all of these colors into a single color design. In this case, it's going to be white. It's just kind of the default. And it sews everything through without changing the colors of them. What I'm going to do now is send it over. It has been now sent over to the screen, and you're going to see that we've got a gray background and we've got this design all in white. Doesn't that actually look quite nice? Wow, I wasn't expecting that. So what we can do in a little bit is maybe we'll walk through some of these functions on the screen. All right, but for right now, I just wanted to show you that one, what was going to happen with that monochrome button. We're going to come back over here. Monochrome is no longer set. All right, this is our save button. So whenever we have composed a design and we want to save it, we're going to select that little icon there. It's a little folder with an arrow going into it. What it will always come over into on this screen here is showing us this little toolbar up on top, which is showing us that we are in a folder in the machine, and it's a folder that's called the EMB folder that's been created on the machine memory. So this is a personally created folder. All right, and we can create our own folders here. These are some that I have made. We're going to look at built-ins. These will save on the hard drive, or we could save something onto a USB that we have on our machine. How did we create a folder? Well, first of all, you would select where you want to create that folder at. In this case, we're going to create a folder here. So I'm going to come down to the bottom toolbar. I'm going to select this little folder with a star next to it, and I'm going to give it a name. Uppercase right here, I'm going to call this square. I don't know, just call it something, whatever this folder is. So what is a folder? It is a folder just like on a computer where you are going to be able to save things into it. Okay, I'm not concentrating, so I have to think about how to spell square. So that's not right. How do you fix it? You use these little arrows here and get back under the letter that you don't want and hit the trash can. All right, now I have spelled it correctly. Now I will say OK. You're going to notice that I've got a new folder here called Square. If I want to save that design into it, I'm going to open that folder. I'm going to give my design a name, so I have to select this pencil, and I'm going to call it New, just because I've got to figure out a word for it and I don't want to think too hard. Something that will make sense to you. Now you're going to be limited on how many characters or how many letters and spaces you can use in these bars. So sometimes you've got to learn a nice, good way of abbreviating things that will make sense to you later. This screen here is verifying that I am saving this into the hard drive memory of my machine. The name of this file is called New, and I'm going to say OK. It's warning me not to turn off my machine. Just as a little test, let's go ahead and pretend that we're going to open a design. Let's look at our built-in designs. I'm going to call them built-ins. I'm calling them the hard drive of my designs. Let's open our square folder. There's that design. So let's look briefly at this little screen while we're here. There's two different ways you can select designs here. You can look at them with this as the default one where it's just showing the design, and it's a pretty small little thumbnail. If I select that icon, it's going to give me a little bit of information about the file type. And I'm going to talk about this. This Jeff Plus right here means that all of those objects that we just created and composed together into that hooping are going to be kept as separate pieces. So if in the future I ever want to open this Jeff Plus file again, I'm going to be able to edit it however I want to edit it. I'm going to be able to get rid of that purple border. I would be able to get rid of some of the little triangles or dots or whatever is in here and redo things. It keeps each little piece as a separate piece, and that is what a Jeff Plus file is. A lot of people sell files that are called Jeff Plus, and they're really just plain old Jeff files. I've got a whole video on that if you're ever interested in watching it as well. So let's go back up. That's showing us the whole menu again. Let's go. I didn't open anything. I didn't select it, so I'm just going to close down this screen. Okay, so we've got our screen showing our composed design. If I say OK now, it's going to send us over to Ready to Sew. It's telling me that that's the hoop that I have selected. And what we've got going on over here, remember that we color sorted our design a little bit, but we're going to look at the tools on the toolbars. This one right here is called I call it the color separator, but I think that the real word for it is actually, what is it really called? I think it's just called show the color section of the design. So when it's turned on, we can see the design part that's actually going to be sewing piece by piece. I always keep this on whenever I'm embroidering a design, and the reason why is it helps us keep track of where we're at in the embroidery process. Or we can flip it back and we can see the entire design, and there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. The next little icon over is called a color list. And there's two different functions of the color list. Right now, you can see that we color sorted our design, so all the purple's going to stitch first, then all of the yellow, and then all of the black. It's got my Isacord 223 notation here that I had typed in, and the other is the default thread chart of Janome polyester. You can change your thread chart over in the settings mode of the machine, okay? The other function of this is if you touch the needle is going to tell us how many stitches are in each section of that design. So that's kind of handy to know. Let's go ahead and close it. The next icon over is only going to want to function if I've got my arm open. So let me go ahead and open my arm up. The reason why is because this is a basting feature. And it's got several different functions in it. So once my hoop is set, okay. So I'll turn it on. The first icon that starts as black is just simply, if you turn this on, your hoop is just going to rotate all around the perimeter of the design to show you how big the design actually is. If you only wanted to see the upper corner, you could select the upper corner or the bottom right corner. You can hear my machine is making noise over here, or you could have it do the entire rotation. Now that one's going to take a little bit of time, so I don't have a hoop on my machine, and you're not even going to be able to see that section of the machine, but yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's doing the bottom. Now it's going to go back up to the top. It always starts in the upper right hand corner as well. I probably shouldn't have turned that one on. Anyway, tracing out the position of the design is oftentimes very helpful when you're getting ready to embroider a design. The next one over is a basting, and this stitches out a really long, loose basting stitch. One of the tips that I have is if you select this and you plan to use the basting, as soon as you hit the start button, your hoop is going to start moving. So immediately hit the stop button. The hoop is going to go ahead and move up to this upper right hand corner, where at that point, because you've stopped the hoop, you're going to be able to pull up your bobbin thread. Hold on to your bobbin thread and your needle thread together before it starts this actual basting. That oftentimes helps to keep those stitches actually forming. It's kind of a too loose, I would say. The tension on it is really loose, and a lot of users have problems with that. The next one over is 2 lines of basting, one on the outer perimeter and one that's somewhere within the middle. And then the last version is what we call our custom basting, and there is some instructions in the book. I think I've also made a video about that somewhere, where you can decide how you want that basting to be formed on your hoop. It's pretty handy. The next icon over is called our adjustment screen. So whenever you're embroidering, if you ever find you need to start adjusting your tension, or how long you want your thread tails to cut, or how high your presser foot is, you can come in here. You have to stop the machine, but you could open up your adjust screen and you can make those adjustments. Plus means it's tightening up your needle tension, which means that it might also pull up some of the bobbin thread. But if you are pulling up bobbin thread, you might want to try to lessen your needle tension. Okay, these are all temporary changes as well. Once you're finished with that design, it's not going to save how you've manipulated these. This is your thread tails. How long do you want them? Longer or shorter? This is your presser foot height. This is really important. If you're new to embroidery, you need to know that you always want your presser foot to just be hovering over the surface of your hooped fabric. And that's a really nice feature of this machines, is that we can raise them and lower them. It's giving us a couple of little tips right here. 1.7 height for, I suppose, most of your average things. This one here is when you're quilting. You might want to really raise it up high so that the presser foot is way up above the height of the hoop surface, because that way it will allow that presser foot to just glide over the surface. Now, one of the things that you want to make sure, why, especially for regular embroidery designs, there's something that we call flagging, like waving a flag. If the presser foot is too high up above the surface of your fabric, that needle pulling in and out of the fabric is going to be going up and down, and it might be pulling that fabric up. And it's kind of causing the fabric to flag in the hoop. That can cause misalignment and other stitching problems. So keeping that presser foot height adjusted properly is pretty important. So I'm just going to say close because I don't want to change anything there. This next icon over is your hoop forward movement. This can really come in handy. You know, our hoop where it connects onto our embroidery unit is pretty far back there. So a lot of people like to pull their hoop forward so that it's a little bit easier to get the hoop connected on and off of the machine, as well as maybe there's times when you're trimming something in the hoop and you might want to pull the hoop forward. You can also use this icon down here to store the embroidery unit in its home position at the end of a sewing session. Next over, we've got the ability to choose which presser foot we're going to use when we're embroidering. The P foot is what came with the machine, and it's to be used for all of your embroidery. All right, and it's easily adjusted. The PC1 and PC2 feet came as a set, and they are the embroidery couching feet. And so if you're ever going to be doing any of the embroidery couching designs, there's actually some free ones for you on the Janome Global website that you can download and save and try those out. They're really quite fun. But if you're not changing anything, you just leave it there. Last one over on this side here is a minor adjustment for rotating things. You know, we had that rotating feature over in the edit mode, but we've also got one here as well. So if you ever find yourself, you know, maybe you had hooped a little bit crooked or something and you think that you might want to rotate your design. Now I can rotate it here, but you don't see anything on the screen. You're just seeing a basic perimeter of how the design would look. Let's just see if I could rotate it. I can't rotate it, and do you know why? Because when I composed this design, I completely filled up that hoop, so there's no ability to rotate there. Okay, this is if we wanted to go back out of this ready to sew screen. Here we've got some information. This is showing us that we have chosen our square 23 hoop. We've got a P foot selected. The design size is 230 by 230 millimeters. Again, that's the size of the square 23 hoop. So we have filled up that space. The design has 12 colors. The tension is set for auto +1. That was a slight adjustment there. My thread cutter is turned on. The stitch limit right now is at 600 stitches per minute, and it should take about 57 minutes to stitch, not counting how long it takes me to rethread my machine. All right, so don't think that that's going to be the final say of how long it's going to take to stitch the design. Now, stitch can be adjusted by the slider bar on the front of the machine. Notice that I've just moved mine up and now it's at 600, 1000. If I took it all the way down to the slowest speed, it would greatly increase the amount of time it would take to stitch out that design. All right, in the settings mode, I'm just going to take a quick jaunt over to the settings mode real quickly. In the embroidery section, there are lots of things you can look at here. Maximum speed setting is on page 2 out of 6. Probably you want to keep it all the way up to 1000. Only for the purpose that then your slider on the machine will be able to allow for all of that. You know, these are some of the settings that you can change as a default. You may notice on mine that I changed the default of my presser foot height to somewhat quite a bit lower, 0.3 millimeters. This will save it, but it can also be changed temporarily over in the actual embroidery side when we're actually there. So notice here, what was I going to show you next? Okay, this here is our stitch counter, and we can travel forward and backwards through our design stitch by stitch by going plus, 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 plus. It's going to move by 1 stitch in the beginning, and then I think it's after you get to about 20 stitches it will start leaping by 10 stitches at a time. Eventually it'll start leaping by 100 stitches at a time if you really need to move through a sequence quickly. And that will work by you just continually holding down the plus button. Once you let go of the plus button or the minus button, it's going to revert back to the 1 stitch at a time. Okay, so that's pretty handy. This little calculator looking item, if you knew the exact stitch number you wanted to jump to, you would just put that in there. I'm just going to move that here. We're going to look at this jog button here. If there was room in the hoop to move your design, you could move it by using these arrow buttons. If you turn on the little crosshair in the middle, that's showing you where you're at in the design. Okay, and remember I'm up all the way here because I just adjusted up to stitch number 450 using the little calculator here. These little arrow buttons help you travel back and forth through the design. Okay, pretty handy way to do it. You just have to wait for your machine to get there. You can continue to try to hit buttons, but the machine has to actually move. Alrighty, so that's basically everything that's on the Ready to Sew screen. Your next big thing that you're going to have to do is learn all about hooping and good ways to hoop and bad things that you don't want to have happen. But hopefully this has been a pretty good overview. I know it's been quite of a long little tutorial. I just hit that backward arrow to bring me back into this Ready to Sew screen. There was one other thing I was going to show you. Oh, it was reducing the color stops. All right, so remember when we were in Ready to Sew, we saw that we had all those blues and all of that together. If I wanted to reduce the color stops, okay, so here we are. It's putting the blues all together. I'm going to hit the plus button. It's putting all the yellows together. It's going to put the black together. I'm going to say OK. It's going to send me over into Ready to Sew, telling me my square 23 hoop. And now you're going to see the color list. See that? From all those blues and all those yellows and all those blacks, it's now changed it into reduce those color stops. This is a really good idea for simple designs. It should not be used for some designs where, let's just say you're making some freestanding lace and maybe you've combined 3 or 4 designs in one hoop. You probably, it's a lace design, let's say for example, that's got, you know, let's say 3 colors in it. You don't want to do this for something like a lace design, because when you're stitching freestanding lace, and there's other designs that this also will apply to, you want to make sure that the movement of the hoop does not cause a misalignment or misregistration of your elements, because then that can cause bad designs. All right, so color sorting is pretty cool. Anyway, I hope that we've gone through most of these tools in the edit mode to satisfy you, for helping you to want to play around here. You know, you can just have so much fun. You're never committed to anything here unless you decide to send it to Ready to Sew and hoop up some fabric. Not a bad idea. It's a lot of fun, and I hope that you are enjoying using your edit mode on the embroidery side of your Janome 15,000 sewing machine. This is Fabi Martinez. Thank you for watching the video. It's about 1 hour long. Bye for now.